Hello, juniors. It is Thursday, March 18th. No, Thursday, March 19th. I'm sorry, I'm all confused. We just finished celebrating Cheney's birthday. She turned 19 today. I think she called this her golden birthday. She's 19 on the 19th in the middle of a pandemic. Woo! Oh, she'll never forget this birthday. I am sitting here with my trusty stash of important things. I have my very valuable toilet paper. I have my sanitizer. My hands are raw, by the way. I have my two children that are watching you. This picture was actually taken in New York City, but several years ago, so we're safe. And then, of course, my wonderful coffee mug that I purchased at Mount Vernon a few years ago. It's my favorite cup to drink from. Whenever I drink from it, I imagine myself sitting there with George and Martha. So I'm surrounded by those things that I love. Unfortunately, you all are not here with me. What else do I have here? Oh, this is very important. I'm surrounded by history. Mr. John Adams is sitting here with us, watching us, contributing to the conversation. He has a lot to say, as always. And I don't know if you can see them. My puppies are napping on the bed. And so if they begin to howl and bark and fight, I'll have to hit pause or stop and start all over again. Or maybe part two. That's what I had to do yesterday when I was recording for the freshmen. So anyway, all right. Enough said. Let's get into this. I'm going to try to make this as short and sweet as possible. You guys have done a fantastic job of answering my calls and returning emails and doing your projects. I am going to pull up my PowerPoint that I'm going to show you, or I'm going to send for you tomorrow. So pretend like you're in class with me. We're going to jump into chapter 15. We're flying through the end of the 19th century. And we have turned the corner. I think President McKinley was assassinated in 1901. And you guys spent some time talking about or looking into captains of industry. We talked in the last session about some of the captains of industry of the late 1800s. We talked about the Vanderbilts, so we talked about Carnegie and some others. And so I asked you guys to find somebody that you'd be interested in doing a very short overview for us, and you have responded, although I think the due date was midnight tonight, so I'm sure I'll be getting some more, but I'm going to read some of the ones that I've gotten so far. Tate Bowers chose Bill Gates, says that he is a philanthropist who works in business, and he is a leader of this business. He's from Seattle, Washington. He became familiar with computers, and he decided to drop out of Harvard University to start Microsoft with his friend Paul Allen. That seems to be a reoccurring theme. Many of the entrepreneurs in our modern era decided they didn't want to stick around for school. I don't encourage that. However, sometimes it works out. Abriel Sprague picked a really interesting one. She picked Walt Disney, which I thought was a great idea. She says he created a huge successful movie production company. And let's see, he created in 1928, he created Mickey Mouse, and he started hand-drawn animation. He created the first full-length colorized movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I thought that was a great one, Abriel. Sam Green and Natalie Franklin both picked the same person. They both picked Elon Musk. Says he's an excellent example of a modern-day titan of industry, founder of multiple successful companies such as SpaceX and Tesla. He is worth an estimated $27 billion. He's ranked 23rd on the Forbes 400 list. Kaylee Murphy really kind of went off the map here and chose somebody who's a captain of industry in the cosmetic industry, Kylie Jenner. I thought that was kind of an interesting pick as well. She was the youngest self-made billionaire in the country. So great so far. And your flags, oh my goodness, the flags. Nick Cox, the bear, the California bear on the California flag is awesome. So that has been so fun to see. Please do not get rid of those. I intend to collect every single one of them, even if I have to drive to your houses at the end of the school year. I want to have those so that I can display them next year. I think I'm going to do this project again next year, so please don't do anything with those. Don't throw them away. So I will be in the process of grading them here as well. Okay, so we're going to talk about chapter 15 today, which the title of that is The New Immigrant, and it spends a lot of time talking about how America's immigrants changed the face of America in the 1900s. There was a huge influx of immigrants beginning around 1900 and beyond, in large part to fuel and to supply labor for the growing industrial complex that was happening, that was growing all over the United States. As steel and oil and gas and all of those things were changing the way that we produce things. Chapter 15 discusses that. So what I'd like for you guys to do, I'm going to email you these instructions, but I want you guys to read chapter 15, section 1, independently, maybe during after you upload the PowerPoint and upload the video. I want you to read it independently. That's going to be one of your assignments. In my PowerPoint, there is a picture of the Statue of Liberty. It's the first significant slide, and it has a writing prompt there. I'm not going to ask you to read it, close your book, and treat it like you would if you were walking into the classroom or you wouldn't get to see your book. You can have your book open, but I do want you to read through the section. I'm not going to have you read much else in this chapter, but I think it's important to read the first chapter. So read it casually. You don't read it for like you're taking a quiz, just read it casually. And then the question says, choose 2 of the following questions from your reading assignment and write a well-developed paragraph. Include as many details as you can remember. If you want to look at your book as you're writing it, you're welcome to do that. I just don't want you to look at a couple of questions, pick a couple of them, target that in the section, and just read that section. I want you to read all of chapter 15, section 1, and it's just going to have to be, I'm going to have to trust you to do that and to indicate that you've done that. So that's the first part of the assignment. And then once you've done that, or you can do this at the end, it doesn't matter to me. There are a couple of pictures of different immigrants coming through the 2 major immigrant stations in the United States at the time. There's a couple of slides that have Bible verses on them. And the reason that those are there is that I generally have a pretty heated discussion about immigration during this section. I have people that have pretty strong opinions about America's current situation with the immigration problems along our southern border in particular. And so we tend to veer off on that and talk about what is our role as Christian Americans in regards to those who live among us that are aliens or immigrants. Some of them are illegal immigrants, some of them are legal immigrants, some of them are permanent residents, some of them are here on student visas, some of them are here on green cards, some of them work for Walmart. Most of the immigrants that you are going to encounter, people who were not born here, but are here for various reasons, are here legally. You might encounter those that are here illegally, but you won't know it. I live in I will call it a sketchy part of Rogers. I'm kind of on the border, and a lot of the homes behind us are rental properties and duplexes. And there, I suspect, are among that population group back there, there probably are a number of illegal immigrants that live in there. Doesn't mean they're bad neighbors, but they tend to live in the shadows, and they tend to live poor. They use cash because they don't have the paperwork in order to file taxes and that sort of thing, so their employers pay them cash under the table, which is a tough situation. And so I have mixed views on it. I believe that you should come here legally. I think that if some of us lived in the conditions that they lived in, you'd probably do everything you could to get to America as well. Doesn't justify it. I think it's always best to do it the legal way. But I've had many conversations with people in around my world of influence here, and I feel compassion for their circumstances, but I want them to come to our country legally. I always will. I would say that's the primary argument or case that I would make to them, that it's better for them, it's better for us. Even in the current situation that we have with the coronavirus spreading all over the place. What happens when a family who is here illegally contracts coronavirus and they're scared to death to go to the hospital, or they're scared to death to report themselves because they might get deported? Will someone in their family lose their life because they're not here legally? How much better it would be for them if they would do what they need to do, no matter how long it takes, so that they can be here legally and access all of the benefits and privileges that they would have here as a legal citizen. So during this era of immigration in the turn of the century, 1900, many immigrants came here, and essentially if they could pay a small fee and they could prove or give evidence that they weren't sick, they had no contagious diseases, if they could prove that they had a place to work and a place to stay, they immediately crossed into America and virtually became citizens with all the rights to vote and everything. Things have changed tremendously. Most of them entered into the cities and worked in the industries in the cities, and you created little enclaves like Little Ireland, Little China, Little Italy, and a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment developed in large part because they secluded themselves. And they took jobs that Native Americans wanted or had need of. And so nativism was a growing sentiment. Nativism means it is somebody who is prefers a native-born American, which is ironic because most of our relatives were not native-born. They weren't Native Americans, they weren't Indians. I'll use that word so you're not confused. So, but anyway, I digress. So, some of the scriptures you'll see on this slide, and I just want you to read them and process it. The first one here says, this is from Deuteronomy: God defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. I believe that this is really talking about people who are amongst you legally. I think you still should love those that are not here legally, but for you, that means you're going to run into people who are here legally, and how should you respond to them? Is your neighborhood primarily from India? Is your neighborhood primarily from Central America? Are the people that you work with in the summertime, are they Spanish speaking? Do you treat them with respect? Do you love them as if they were your own kin? I think that that's what that verse is referring to. Number 7, or slide 7, says, when a stranger sojourns within your land, you should do him no wrong. You should treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you yourselves were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Again, I believe that verse is referring to people who are in your country legally. Those circumstances and borders did not exist the same way in biblical times as they do now. But that does not mean that we should not treat those among us, irregardless of their status, with disregard. We still should take care of them if we're able to, and let the law handle the other problems. But anyway, okay, moving on. There are several pictures in the PowerPoint of immigrants departing their ships and coming aboard. In the United States, Ellis Island becomes the primary port of entry where the Statue of Liberty is in New York City, and then Angel Island was the primary port of entry in California on each coast. And very different circumstances. Most of the people coming through Ellis Island, New York were European, and most of the people coming through Angel Island were Asian. I would say that probably the Asian immigrants were treated much worse than the European immigrants were treated, regardless, and certainly that manifested itself in the way they were treated at their entry points. At Ellis Island, they were essentially, after a brief period of time, welcomed into the city. At Angel Island, sometimes they would have to spend a long time hanging around, being interrogated. Their customs were different. They looked different. They had different religious practices. They had different hygiene practices, whole host of things. Actually, the Asian immigrants tended to be much cleaner than the European immigrants as far as their sanitary practices. I would like for you guys to watch the John Green Crash Course on Immigrants. It's really entertaining, as he always is. Remember, whenever you're watching John Green, he is an antagonist. He comes at things kind of negatively and sarcastically. I always feel like he's kind of got an anti-American thread pulsing through his sarcasm. And then at other times he doesn't, but always whenever you watch him use that filter and understand that he has a bias as you have a bias and I have a bias. But the factual information that he provides is very, it's good and entertaining. Just keep that in mind. Actually, any teacher you have is going to have a bias. Immigration numbers during this period of time. Between 1851 and 1883, 300,000 Chinese passed through the West Coast entrance. From 1880 to 1920, there were also a number of people from the Caribbean area. 260,000 Jamaicans came to the United States. Cuba, Puerto Rico, West Indies. From 1910 to 1930, 700,000 Mexicans passed into the United States. Their government was very unstable during that era. Between 1892 and 1924, in New York City, what is known as Ellis Island, 17 million people came into the country through Ellis Island. And then in total, between 1870 and 1920, about 20 million European immigrants came to the United States. So pretty staggering numbers. There are several pictures of Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. So the Statue of Liberty is an island where the statue is there. Ellis Island is a man-made island in the river there as you approach New York City. That basically was a docking station. You can go there. Cheney and I visited there this past summer. You can walk through the halls yourself. It's pretty cool to be in there and imagine what it must have been like with all those people, thousands of people coming and going every day. The island was created from the dirt that was pulled out of the ground when they were making the New York subway systems. And so they made this artificial island. There's also an adjoining island that's connected. I think it's connected by a bridge or a walkway that was the hospital complex. There is a video link on this PowerPoint. I'm also going to include it in my my email. I would like for you guys to watch about 30 minutes of it. And it has to do with what happened to a person who came to the United States from a foreign country who was sick. How were they treated? What were they looking for? What happened if one person in a family of 10 was sick? Did just that one person get sent back, or did the whole family get sent back? How many people died there? What kind of contagious diseases were they worried about? Today we're dealing with this crisis. Our borders have been closed to China, to Europeans. The Canadians have closed the border because we do not want the rapid spread of this particular contagious disease coming into our country any more than we're already dealing with it. Well, you can imagine what that was like in 1920. The only way they really had to tell was, do you have a fever? Are your eyelids pink? Are they red from, that would mean you would have a fever. They would check your throat. They would check your skin to see if you had any rashes. And if you did, you would have to go through a more significant physical and determine whether or not you had to be quarantined for a period of time. So very similar to some of the things that we're actually seeing play out today. So it's about an hour-long documentary. I only want you to watch the first 30 minutes or so, and I will notate that in the email. Let's see here. There are some more statistics specifically talking about Angel Island and California Island. Just read through those when you get those. There's a definition for nativism, a public sentiment that demonstrates favoritism toward native-born Americans and supported anti-immigrant legislations and actions. And I'm going to read through this. You'll have access to it as you are looking at it on the screen. Nativists believe that Anglo-Saxon immigrants were superior to other immigrants. Most of us have Anglo-Saxon blood. Those are German, British, Scandinavian, all those pasty white people. Those are Anglo-Saxons. Also, nativists favored Protestant immigrants over Catholic and Jewish immigrants. Many colleges, businesses, social clubs actually refused to even admit Jewish people during this era, which is, again, sad, but true. Nativists also believed that immigrants should be able to pass an English test of sorts. They would wanted them to know at least 40 specific English words in order to come into the country. I don't think that ever became law, but that was pushed for a long time. And ultimately, there were a couple of laws that were passed that excluded somewhat Asian immigrants. In 1882, Congress passed something called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned most Chinese immigration. That law was not repealed until 1943, so it was in place for a very long time. Teddy Roosevelt made an agreement with the Japanese in 1907, 1908. It was called the Gentleman's Agreement. Japan agreed to limit emigration in exchange for allowing Teddy Roosevelt forcing California schools to allow Japanese immigrants to attend public schools because they weren't allowed to, which is sad. So that's kind of the bulk of this particular PowerPoint slide. So in summary, I want you to read chapter 15, section 1. Let me know that you've done that. I want you to submit a well-developed paragraph answering 2 of the questions in the first slide that you'll see, first major slide. I want you to watch the Crash Course John Green episode on immigrant cities. And then I want you to watch about the first 30 minutes or so of the documentary on Ellis Island. And once you've done that and submitted to me via email that yes, with your little paragraph, then we're going to call it spring break. And I know there's still lots of questions about what's going to happen after spring break. I don't know. I'll probably know about 2 seconds before you know. Things are changing rapidly. But we'll just kind of address that once we get there. I want you guys to have a fantastic, safe spring break. I'm praying for you guys. If you follow my Instagram account, I'm going to post 3 or 4 specific things that I'd love for you guys to pray for. Every single day. Prayer is our most powerful weapon right now. I don't want you to be fearful. God knows it all, and we are certainly living in unusual times, and literally you will look back on this time and be like, wow. I hope that you'll have a greater appreciation for the privileges and the freedom that we generally experience in this country, that we are being restricted from enjoying somewhat because of the situation on the ground. But God knows it all. He's got our backs. But he does want us to engage with him and to pray to him and to ask specific things of him. And I hope that you guys will take advantage of this and spend time with him every single day. Great time to consume his word and to commit it to memory. Man, this is a great time to do this. Your brains are young and fresh, and you've got time to do it. I really hope that you will. Love you guys. I look forward to corresponding with you via email, and I will do everything I can to try to stay on top of all this stuff, okay? All this grading and everything that teachers have to do. So love you guys. Talk at you on the other end of spring break or through an email. Bye.